In the previous lesson, we dove into the 4 different lenses used in 4D road mapping. This helped us understand how each lens contributes unique value and has specific blind spots, requiring us to balance between each of the lenses. In this lesson, we'll begin walking through the full 4D road mapping process. Recall that there are 3 high-level steps to 4D road mapping. First, you determine the target KPIs you want to move. Then, you do a constrained brainstorm for objectives and initiatives that move those target KPIs using each of the 4 different lenses. Finally, you prioritize those objectives and initiatives to come up with a concrete roadmap. This lesson will focus on steps 1 and 2. Let's briefly talk about step 1, align on KPIs you want to move. We keep this step brief because in Module 4, Lever Dashboards, you already created a list of potential KPIs you might want to focus on. The major incremental thing you're doing in this step is aligning with leadership on that list of KPIs to focus on. This is key because this alignment sets the focus for the rest of your brainstorming and prioritization. If leadership and the team have different ideas of what the target KPI is, then your execution will look like 2 lines pointing in slightly different directions. Early on, your execution direction will look close enough to leadership's desired execution direction because you are relatively close to the area they want to head. However, over time, the difference gets much larger, which ends up leading to bigger and bigger problems. When the difference gets too large, it leads to a late-stage blow-up, where the roadmap has to be completely reworked because it turns out leadership wanted the PM to work on a completely different set of target KPIs. As Adam Fishman says, leadership decides what the most important business metrics are, but the PM has to decide what metrics best support them. Missing this alignment step is a recipe for disastrous roadmap building and a lot of rework. Write down what target KPIs you'll focus on in your Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. In step 2, you do a constrained brainstorm of objectives and initiatives using the 4 lenses. You'll recall that a constrained brainstorm is where you restrict your objective and initiative brainstorming to those that will move your target KPIs. This helps ensure that your ultimate list of ideas is concentrated on improving just your target KPIs, thereby creating focus in your roadmap. To start, you'll use each of the 4 lenses as a thought starter for objectives. Let's first define what we mean by objectives. Objectives are high-level goals that describe what you hope to accomplish. They provide focus for your team on the most important roadmap themes. For example, SurveyMonkey wanted to double down on the significant traffic they were seeing from SEO. So they came up with the objective: significantly grow organic traffic by optimizing the most visited SEO pages. To avoid making your objective too broad, a good litmus test is to ask yourself, can you tell how the product will improve based on reading the objective? This would mean goals like invest more in the core product experience would be too broad to be an objective, since you can't tell how the product will specifically improve. On the other hand, to avoid making your objective too narrow, a good litmus test is to ask yourself, how many other goals of this magnitude could I implement in a quarter? Sachin Reiki says, objectives should generally be big enough that you can only work on 1 to 4 per quarter. If it's smaller, it's probably more an initiative than an objective. Then, once you've come up with objectives, ideate on initiatives that support that objective. Initiatives are the smaller, individual tasks that ladder up to fulfilling an objective. To illustrate this, consider NoteJoy. NoteJoy might have an objective to increase the number of sharing use cases to better accelerate its viral acquisition. The individual initiatives that support that objective would be Zoom integration, allows users to take meeting notes directly in the Zoom client environment. Since meeting notes are naturally collaborative with all attendees, users will regularly expose other people in their organization to NoteJoy. NoteJoy tasks allow users to assign tasks created in NoteJoy to specific users, thereby introducing NoteJoy to task assignees. Note that objective initiative brainstorming is not a purely linear process. Brainstorming objectives doesn't always come first. For some lenses, you might think of an initiative first. This might then prompt several related initiative ideas, which you can then combine to create a full-fledged objective. For example, as with NoteJoy, rather than thinking of the objective first, the PM might first have thought to create a Zoom integration. Realizing one of the end benefits of the Zoom integration is to deepen sharing use cases, they might think about how else they could deepen sharing use cases as an objective. So, as a quick recap, objectives are high-level goals that describe what you hope to accomplish. Initiatives are the smaller individual tasks that ladder up to achieving the objective. With that, let's start walking through how to brainstorm using each lens. First, we'll start with the strategy lens. Recall that this lens is focused on moving your target KPI by furthering your product along its strategic dimensions. To get your brainstorming started, consider the following 5 prompts, each roughly correlating to a dimension of product strategy from your product strategy map. For target audience, ask yourself, if I'm serving my existing audience well enough, how might I expand my existing target audience? The first part of the question is key, so as to not dilute your efforts across multiple audiences before first building a strong product for a core audience. Some indicators that you're serving your existing target audience well enough include high NPS. Exact definition of high NPS varies by industry and product, but 30 to 40 is often considered great. High retention. Specifically, you look for your retention curve to not just flatten, but flatten at a percentage that compares to industry levels. If you are serving your existing target audience well, then look to the outer concentric rings in your audience bullseye diagram to see who else it might make sense to serve. For this new audience, consider how their needs might differ, and how you could best solve those needs to acquire them. To illustrate this, consider LinkedIn Sales Navigator. At one point in their life cycle, the Sales Navigator team was evaluating whether they should expand their target audience. To decide this, they looked at their NPS surveys. It turned out their NPS for hunters was already at 50, which they considered good enough to start expanding their audience. Recall that the Sales Navigator audience bullseye had multiple layers. Their first 3 were B2B hunters in tech/finance with greater than 100K ACV, all B2B hunters with greater than 100K ACV, all B2B sales professionals with 100K ACV. At that time, Sales Navigator had already progressed to the second ring, all B2B hunters with greater than 100K ACV, meaning their next expansion would be sales professionals with greater than 100K ACV. Specifically, this meant they would need to expand from just serving hunters, account executives, to farmers, account managers as well. To ideate how to serve this new audience, they examined the differences in job responsibilities and tactics. They found that account managers use a specific technique called multi-threading, which is where they connect with multiple people at a company, instead of one, to increase account sales. Based on this, the LinkedIn team created an objective to facilitate multi-threaded sales. To support this objective, they identified initiatives for multi-threading, such as lead recommendations. That covers brainstorming for a target audience. Take the time here to brainstorm your target audience objectives and initiatives in the Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. Next, ask yourself, how can we better fulfill our value proposition? This question covers both the problem you're solving as well as value proposition dimensions, since they are closely related. Your value proposition can be thought of as your answer to the problem you're solving. Accordingly, better fulfilling your value proposition also more deeply solves your problem. To brainstorm objectives, begin by recalling how your product strategy map breaks down your value proposition into individual sub-value propositions. For each of the sub-value propositions, consider whether you might be under-delivering on them, and how you might rectify any under-deliveries. To identify if you're under-delivering on a sub-value proposition, consider the following potential indicators. First, look for low feature engagement, i.e. features that support your sub-value proposition aren't used. Each sub-value proposition is delivered by a set of features. If these features aren't being used, then it's possible that users aren't receiving that sub-value proposition. For example, one of NoteJoy's sub-value propositions is capture at the speed of thought. This sub-value proposition is supported by features like the web clipper and keyboard shortcuts. If these supporting features have low engagement numbers, NoteJoy users might not be experiencing capture at the speed of thought. A second potential indicator of sub-value proposition under delivery is lack of NPS mentions. NPS survey responses will indicate what people like most about your product. If the sub-value proposition isn't mentioned in these verbatims, there is a possibility users aren't experiencing it. To fix this, your objectives can be to directly improve the existing related features. Focus on improving the functionality of the features related to the sub-value proposition, or implement new features. Identify other ways to fulfill the sub-value proposition. To illustrate this, consider one of Figma's sub-value propositions, brainstorm ideas together. Users complained that they couldn't effectively do this because they were unable to merge in edits from separate files. To solve this, Figma created an objective to implement branching functionality, where changes from other files could be merged into a main file. This is similar to how code is managed. Take the time here to brainstorm your value proposition objectives and initiatives in the Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. The third prompt for your strategy lens is, how can we improve our strategic differentiation? Objectives here focus on improving the unique attribute you identified as your strategic differentiator in the product strategy map. To illustrate this, let's use LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Recall that their strategic differentiation is their breadth and accuracy of member profile data, enabling sales professionals to more easily find relevant prospects. However, data was sometimes unstandardized. For example, location was a free text field. This meant people would write San Francisco CA, SF, or Bay Area to refer to the same location. When sales professionals also searched for a free text location, it made it difficult for them to find all the relevant results. To solve this, Sales Navigator created an objective to improve standardization of location data to improve search relevance, using initiatives like standardize existing free text locations using machine learning, and make location selection a drop-down instead of freeform. Take the time here to brainstorm your strategic differentiation objectives and initiatives in the Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. The fourth strategy lens prompt is, how can we accelerate our channel strategy? To get brainstorming started, use the common patterns for improving product channel fit from the product strategy module as a thought starter. For example, consider Figma, which primarily grows via virality. Improving product channel fit for virality-based products means creating quick time to value, as well as making invites as frictionless as possible. However, Figma's pricing structure limited their virality. They capped the number of editors in the free plan while not limiting numbers of files or projects per editor. This created friction in their invite process, meaning users were less likely to invite others to try Figma. To fix this, they made an objective to completely revamp their pricing plan, which ultimately culminated in their free plan having unlimited editors and limited files and projects. Take the time here to brainstorm your channel strategy objectives and initiatives in the Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. Finally, the last strategy lens prompt is, how might we better realize our monetization potential? Objectives fall into two categories: improving product model fit and using the common patterns for improving fit as discussed in the product strategy module. For example, MailChimp primarily serves SMBs. One of the ways it can improve its product market fit is by increasing self-servability. To that end, they make their tools extremely intuitive to use. Developing features that have high user willingness to pay, doing competitive benchmarking or user research to find what users highly value. To illustrate this, consider NoteJoy. NoteJoy benchmarked what other competitors, like Evernote, charged for. Offline support was a common premium feature, making it a possible objective for NoteJoy. Take the time here to brainstorm your monetization strategy objectives and initiatives in the Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. Next, let's cover brainstorming using the Vision lens. Recall that this lens is focused on developing your product to be closer to the vision you've painted. To brainstorm your objectives and initiatives, look at your vision narrative and parse out what has to happen in order to achieve it. If you've written your vision narrative to be detailed and opinionated, each detail will be a distinct objective or initiative. For example, consider NoteJoy's collaboration vision. In it, some vision details correspond to distinct feature objectives, like implementing library overviews and weekly newsletters. Other vision details are less broad in implementation scope and correspond more directly to distinct initiatives, like thumbs up and @mentions. In some cases, the details in the vision will be too large to be specific objectives, in which case they have to be broken down further. For example, let's consider Lyft's vision. This vision involves moving from autonomous fixed route cars to autonomous cars. Autonomous fixed route cars alone are already a major piece of work, probably far too monolithic an effort to be a single objective. To fix this, Lyft would consider the major pieces of work underneath it, such as get city approval for trial, develop basic traffic sign recognition in lab, and successfully test drive in field. Once you've created your objectives, consider which serve as prerequisites for others. This helps you further narrow down the potential list of objectives to work on. For example, in the Lyft example above, a test drive in the field would never be a candidate objective until city approval for a trial is obtained. Using this knowledge, take the time to think about what objectives and initiatives you would have for the vision section of your Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. Break down your vision into distinct objectives and initiatives, making sure to order them as needed if certain milestones must happen before others. Now, let's talk about the customer lens. Recall that this lens is focused on solving problems that users have explicitly surfaced through feedback. Fortunately, brainstorming here is made easy by your feedback system of record, FSOR, which captures all the user feedback created. However, you can't simply just take the top request from the FSOR and consider that for your brainstorm. There are 3 common issues with FSOR feedback requests that you have to filter for. The first common issue is the vocal minority. Vocal minorities are users who don't necessarily represent your core audience, but make a disproportionate amount of feature requests. If you build too much for the vocal minority, you often end up degrading the experience for your core audience. To avoid this trap, ask yourself whether the features being requested solve a problem experienced by the majority of your user base. To illustrate this, consider LinkedIn. LinkedIn's heaviest users, salespeople and recruiters, tend to be the most vocal about feature requests. However, they don't represent the majority of the professionals on LinkedIn. These power users might request easier and more numerous ways to reach out to their prospects and candidates, something core users care comparatively little about. Over-catering toward these power users creates the risk of normal users getting flooded with unwanted sales and recruiting outreach, making them more likely to disengage. This worsens the experience for all users. The second common issue is the non-target user. It's difficult to target acquisition efforts precisely, so most companies end up with users outside of their intended target audience. We call these users non-target users. Because the product wasn't necessarily built for them, these users end up experiencing issues and submit feedback to drive the product towards their specific use case. If you don't filter out feedback from these users, you end up building your product away from your true target audience. To solve for this, read the feedback river to get a sense of the last 20 to 30 people who asked for the feature. Using identifying data points like previous feedback, job title, etc., ascertain whether they are in your target audience. To illustrate this, let's consider Loom, a desktop video recording and sharing tool. Their range of audiences might include professionals in customer success, sales, leadership, and education, as well as personal users. Let's say, based on retention curves, Loom knows its target user is solely customer success and sales. In order to avoid building for the non-target users, i.e. the personal leadership and education users, Loom would need to read through who's requesting each feature to determine whether those features fit their target audience or not. The third common issue is suboptimal solutioning. Users and customers typically communicate the solution that is most top of mind to them, not the best solution overall. As a result, if you simply implement the stated requests, you end up with a suboptimal solution. To solve this, first ask yourself, what would a requested solution solve for? Based on your understanding of the problem, think about the best way to solve it. For example, consider Product Board, a platform used to help guide product management. One of the user-requested solutions was to have a way to see what modifications were made to a board. Product Board dug into what problem this would specifically solve and found that the user actually needed a way to guard against accidental deletions. Based on this, Product Board's objective was to implement more robust data retention, rather than enable users to view board edit history. Using this knowledge, write down what your customer lens objectives and initiatives might be in the Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. Finally, let's cover the business lens. Recall that the business lens captures objectives and initiatives that focus on improving very specific input metrics for your KPIs. Each of your target KPIs will have its own set of input metrics that influence it, with some being more influential than others. To find your target KPIs, use the same methodology as you did in the Lever Dashboards module. 1. Develop a driver tree to find input metrics, and 2. Run correlation analyses as needed to determine which input metrics are the KPIs. You then focus your business lens on improving these. For example, when LinkedIn Sales Navigator was trying to improve its target KPI of saved leads, they drew out a driver tree for what drove saved leads and used correlation analysis to determine total Sales Navigator traffic was one of saved leads' KPIs. Their business lens accordingly focused on driving more Sales Navigator traffic. To get your brainstorming started, consider the 3 common categories for business lens objectives. The first category is conversion optimizations, such as pricing or landing page optimization, onboarding tweaks, and changes to user cancellation or checkout flow. An illustrative example of this is the A/B testing done at Imperfect Foods. They tried onboarding flows with and without add-on suggestions to see which had better user activation. They additionally tried different checkout designs to see how they might improve their cart abandonment rate. The second common category of business lens objectives is awareness improvements. This includes more marketing emails or in-product notifications. The Slack example we discussed in Lesson 1 is a good one to consider. When Slack found it was user indexing on free-to-paid conversion, one of the immediate tweaks it could make was to improve the total number of people aware of the paid product. To that end, they became much more progressive with their email campaigns and added an in-product upgrade banner. The third common category of business lens objectives is other non-product changes, such as pricing changes or sales efficiency improvements. For example, LinkedIn Sales Navigator built a sales propensity model to prioritize which free LinkedIn members were most likely to respond positively to a free trial. These prioritized members would then get a free trial offer. The sales propensity model only affected which users received a free trial email and didn't directly modify the core product experience of Sales Navigator in any way. However, it did significantly accelerate purchases of Sales Navigator, improving their target monetization metric. That concludes Business Lens brainstorming. We suggest taking the time now to write down what your Business Lens objectives and initiatives might be in the Reforge 4D Roadmaps template. Once you've done that, we've now covered how to brainstorm objectives and initiatives from all 4 lenses, using unique prompts to stimulate ideas specific to accomplishing the goals those lenses set forth. After going through these steps, you should now have a unique set of objectives and initiatives that ladder up to solving the critical few target KPIs you want to move. In finishing these 2 steps, you are now already significantly farther along at producing a needle-moving, focused roadmap that gains leadership buy-in. Because you have first prioritized solving specific metrics and objectives, you have created focus and a clear narrative to leadership. Additionally, because you are explicitly thinking about furthering your strategy and vision, you already are much more likely to work on needle-moving initiatives. In the next lesson, we'll cover the final step, prioritizing your objectives and initiatives into a concrete roadmap.